My name is Deborah Hathaway. I am the director of the Learning and Teaching Collaborative here on the Bothell campus. And I am also a member and a co-lead of the Teaching at UW network, which includes my wonderful colleagues from the Seattle campus and the Tacoma campus as well. So I'm so grateful to be working with them and to be connecting with you all here today as well. This is about updates to the faculty code recently approved by the Faculty Senate, and this session today focuses on the core element of relevance. So the core element of effective teaching about relevance. So our agenda for today is I'm going to do a little bit of a more introduction around relevance and why we're here today and how we can learn about relevance. And then I'm going to introduce our panelists and we're going to explore some questions together around how our panelists create and foster relevance in their courses, and then how they have demonstrated or plan to demonstrate this element in their teaching, of their teaching in an annual evaluation or promotion 10-year scenarios. So the first thing I want to do is introduce the element for those of you that are not familiar with it as yet. I'm going to share my screen to show you our webpage that tells a little bit more about this core element online. So here's our page on relevant teaching, and the definition that we're working with for today is to effective teaching helps learners understand why what they are learning matters and prepares them for future learning and life after the UW. So, so just talk a little bit more about this element to begin with. I'm really, really happy that I get to be the moderator and facilitator for today's conversation. This element feels very near and dear to my heart. My background is in theater and theater education, and I'd often teach first year students at UW Bothell. In those classes, a lot of the questions I would get from those students would be, I have no idea why I'm taking your class. How is this relevant to me? Please tell me. So this feels particularly helpful for me to have this conversation with you all and with our panelists to discuss that, and for me to also articulate how important it was to have conversations with my students around how the work we were doing in my class was relevant and how it could help them both in their academic career at UW and also beyond that. So that felt like a particularly meaningful conversation and something that I'm happy to dive into more with our panelists today. So without further ado, I'm so happy that I get to introduce our panelists today for this conversation. Our first panelist is Linford Lamptey, who is an assistant teaching professor in English on the Seattle campus, and Jody Early, who is a professor in the School of Nursing and Health Studies on the Bothell campus. Thank you both so much for being here. I feel so happy to participate in this conversation with you. And I'm going to ask those two questions that we spoke about earlier. And the first one that I want to pose to you both is to just have a initial conversation that we can have together about how you create and or foster relevance in your classes. So Jody, I'll have you share a little bit more
Sure.
first.
Sure. I'm going to go ahead and lead us off. I'm a really visual person. So we have, Linford and I have prepared some slides for today just to guide our conversations. So as Deborah mentioned, I'm Jody Early and I am teaching on the Bothell campus. And although I'm in the School of Nursing and Health Studies, I am actually, I'm come from public health and community health. So I'm not a nurse. But I thought I'd share a little bit about my background just because I think it has relevance to talking about relevance and how we see relevance in our classroom. I grew up a first gen student, so going to college was something that was always encouraged in my family, but it was also really, really difficult coming from a low income household. And my journey to higher education is rather, it's not traditional. So I taught in K through 12 public education, had a humanities background, and then got interested in community health, public health during the very early onset of HIV/AIDS and doing community-based work through volunteering. Then pursued a master's and PhD in relation to that. But most of my scholarship and my work is really centered around partnering and co-creating with communities. And so I feel very, very lucky that I'm able to teach at UW Bothell, at UW, focused on impact, but also the importance of community engagement in the work that we do, and our interdisciplinarity as well. And so I wouldn't be, I think, it would be remiss of me as someone whose work is rooted in critical pedagogy not to start with this quote from Paulo Freire. Um, a lot of the work that Freire has published is really aligned with the work that I know many of us do at UW. But this quote in particular, I think, really helps ground our conversation today. That knowledge emerges not only through invention and reinvention, but through restless and patient, continuing and hopeful inquiry human beings pursue in the world, with the world, and with each other. And so that is something that really guides me in interweaving the scholarship that I do, the service that I do in community and praxis in with the pedagogy. Um, I think that it's really the secret sauce to transformational learning. I thought I'd also mention a little bit more about the student perspective and what the latest research has shown us in terms of what brings students to higher education. But one of the latest Strata Gallup polls, that I believe this data is from 2025, and we have this in our references as well. But it's a sample of over 86,000 U.S. College students and more than 3,000 institutions. When surveyed about what brings them, what is their motivation to higher education, 58% of them reported that job and career outcomes was their primary motivating factor. And only 23% actually said that it was for general learning, broadening our horizons, etc. So I think that's really important as we think about the way that maybe our programs or disciplines in higher education has changed in general, is to understand the impetus for students who are coming to our programs. And with that, we recently asked our group of master students this question. We ask them this in the beginning and we ask them at the end, what they've gained through this. But one of our master students said that she sought out our program because we emphasized working with community partners who are doing critical work, the kind of work that she has hoped to do, and that we are supporting individuals being impacted by most of these policy decisions that we see that are currently impacting our nation and our communities and ourselves. So students, what I'm finding is that students are seeking that connection to the community and to future employers before they ever get out of the classroom. And some of them, of course, bring all of this, a lot of rich experience and connections to the classroom, but we know that especially the students that we serve on our Bothell campus, that isn't necessarily the case. And also, I would say what I think about a lot too is just how am I preparing our students for the jobs that may not even exist. And this has a financial impact as well. So by providing teaching that allows them to do this project-based learning and critical thinking, community engagement, we're also helping them not only on the job market, but socioeconomically. From this data, we've seen that those who have had these types of experiences before they leave their degree programs, they earn on average about $15,000 more a year. It's not, we don't pursue learning or teaching just for the almighty dollar, but I think this underscores that it does have a powerful impact. And then just going back to maybe the students that are in our classrooms who we're working with, we see a reduction in the amount of students that are actually coming to our campus with some sort of connection or some lived experience that is really fundamental for their pathway to their career. So I think that just also underscores the need we have to be thinking about some of these more transformational experiences in our teaching and more applied work. And then we have the employer perspective in terms of relevance. This is information that I share with our students to also help them understand why we're focusing on certain things in our classes and assignments. And according to the National Association for Colleges and Employers, this also is from the 2024 survey. When asked what are their top attributes or skills that employers are looking for, this is, we have problem solving, at the top, but you can see I've been tracking this over the years. And what I also find interesting, this is just the shortened list, is the emphasis also on emotional intelligence, on follow through, initiative. So there's things that pop up that we like to have conversations with students about at the very beginning and throughout the program so that they understand, yeah, this is why we might be focusing on a team project, so that it doesn't seem so disconnected. And also from the perspective of the employer, many of them are looking for these skills. If students can document projects on their resumes and actually demonstrate how they've applied what they've learned, that is stronger than just speaking to GPA alone. In fact, we see like over the years, just less of an emphasis on what the overall GPA is and more about what have you done and can you articulate what you've done. And so I think about these things in my teaching, and my focus today to share with you a few examples is going to be a little bit different but complementary to what Linford's going to be sharing. My focus really tends to lean, because of the work that I'm doing and with community, really looks at relevance in terms of beyond the classroom, with global and community partnerships, translational based, project based learning, and then career readiness. And Linford's going to be talking about how we can strengthen our pedagogies from the inside out, helping students more deeply understand our methods and the whys behind them. So how do I foster relevance in my pedagogy? I actually think it's really been there from the start. And if I can't answer the question, why am I doing this, or why is this important? My students, I have no credibility. So I have to understand that from the very beginning when I'm designing these classes. And a lot of them are project-based learning with community partners. And as faculty, I can tell you that adds an additional layer of work. Oftentimes it's not always recognized, right? But the rewards, I think, are so great, and they come with hearing my students get internships or jobs that come from knowing some of these community partners and the works they've done. So what I've tried to build in to some of our core courses is a model. It's a flipped model, really, of working with partners. And some of you across, I know I'm preaching to the choir here in terms of our vast tri-campus, because you can only just look at our UW News to see that these types of experiences are happening in fascinating ways all over the university. So I am definitely not unique, but there might be something that I share that might be helpful and likewise, I'd love to hear from you as well. But in the course-based projects, I call this the flip model, because we know too from our community partners that they're already weighted down, especially our nonprofit organizations, with so much. They don't have a lot of bandwidth to be hosting students on site. So we think about collaborating on a project in which the partner themselves comes to the classroom and poses the challenges to the student to work on. And so in my class, we call that the partner challenge, and it comes in many different forms depending on the class. So for example, in a graduate program, 505, which is Critical Approaches to Health Communications, this quarter we partnered with the Snohomish Health Department, our students did, and the Health Education and Community Prevention Services team actually came. And each of these individuals here, one of them is one of our alums, came to, it was a communication challenge for a number of different audiences. So it could be, one was designing some health communication on cannabis and mental health for youth. Another one was looking at the spread of STIs in older populations, 55 and older, all different groups, all different issues, and students could opt into being a part of one of these teams. And the format for the deliverables was different as well, depending on the audience. And so partners came in several times throughout the quarter, 3 times actually, we had roundtable discussions, and the students would actually show their work to the partner and get feedback in real time. And then some of these works are going on to be utilized in, there's a program that's working with a local senior center. There is some summer tabling going on with the health department. Pride is coming up. So there's a lot of these events that student work can actually be translated directly into community. For an undergraduate class that I taught this year, our partner challenge was with the Forefront Suicide Prevention Center here at UW, I should say. And the challenge is really thinking about how to connect with young adults around this topic. And we chose to really center on the power of social connection and how important social connection was. We know just from research how disconnected we're becoming as a society, and how youth especially are feeling that disconnection. And so the Forefront Center, it's May, Mental Health Month. You'll see some of these videos that were actually shared through the Forefront Center, but this was back in the fall, and so students were challenged to come up with short form video reels for this campaign called The Power of Connection. And so their audience was really themselves. They're part of the audience. They know sort of how to reach each other better than we do. And so they were divided into teams, and they created some short form reels, and you'll see some of those out now. And then another way that we have partnered is just through things like we have independent studies, but also in our classrooms, some of our students are being able to write. We have policy briefs being written. We have a few of our students in one of my classes actually published their health narratives for a journal called Narrative Matters, which looks at how stories can be used to impact policy. And so they're getting to see while they're in our program how their own stories can make a difference. And it's really rewarding to see their self-efficacy as well, strengthen along the way as they do these things. And something else about relevance is also just bringing in the organizations that they're working with, and also some of their potential future employers, of giving them feedback on their work in real time. It's one thing for me as the faculty to be giving them feedback, and even their peers, but when you have the community partners, and those are actually doing work on the ground that our students are aspiring to do, give them feedback, there's like an added layer, I think, I see this in the students, of like commitment to the work, but also like a more openness, if you will, to get that sort of critique. And we talk a lot about getting feedback and giving feedback, and the importance of that. And I'm finding it's getting it's getting more and more important to do that, and to talk about how to give and receive feedback. But that goes over really well. And then some of us who are involved with our scholarship can serve as a place where students can also hook in and can be translating their skills directly into practice. The UW has so many wonderful, centers and faculty doing research, that this is just another way that students can also understand how their work is relevant and applied, and how our scholarship really can also translate directly into communities. One thing I wanted to mention too is just the importance of having a global to local perspective, and how having students connect the relevance of what they're doing in this part of the world to the broader context of the issue globally. So one of the things we've been doing in our undergrad and grad program is incorporating the collaborative online international learning. So mentioning that group of students who did just short form video reels, we were also able to partner with a classroom with faculty in Ireland who also were teaching a health promotion class, and they too got the same challenge and from the same partner. So, in those video reels that you'll see from the Forefront Center, you might see a couple of them popping up from Irish students talking about connection and ways in which they're connecting with their community. So, COIL has been a really powerful strategy as well to have our students understand the value beyond our own bubble here, and also just working on in terms of pedagogy, being able to collaborate with faculty from, in this case, Ireland, and having faculty exchanges and student exchanges, and that's also been helpful for us as well in terms of seeing connections translate across continents. And then, of course, through capstones and research, we is where students can also be, our pedagogy can also help them see how that's translated into community. Having the opportunity to mentor and co-present in research and symposia is also a way for students to understand the relevance of the work that we're doing and also get feedback in other ways. And then finally, I'll just mention that we've been thinking more about in our program about the importance of micro credentials, and as they are, in our programs, I think this is the trend too in higher education and where we're going. Is yes, the degree is important. Are there other things they can pick up along the way? Are these micro areas, whether it's technical writing that I think Linford's going to talk more about, or it's health education and promotion? There's a certification called the CHES exam, so our students are automatically eligible to sit for this exam because our curriculum is relevant to those competencies within the national accrediting body. So now I think Deborah, unless you want to say a few words, we were going to shift over and Linford was going to talk more about the pedagogy that he uses in Relevance.
Yeah, that's perfect. And I would just say, Jody, the thing that I'm hearing, one of the things I'm hearing as a through line for me is just this question of what is possible, how you've been able to make connections for students in translating their skills and articulating them into their resumes, into job interviews, and also what is possible in terms of the connections of how they might view or see opportunities that maybe they would have never seen prior to being in a course, and making a connection for themselves in terms of, oh, maybe this internship is really the field that I want to go into, or provides me with an opportunity to connect to some sort of smaller topic that feels really relevant and supportive for my learning and my continued journey. So that beyond piece and that what is possible really showed up a lot in what I heard you saying. And as we've been colleagues in community engaged learning as well, like just the importance of that work in being able to help students feel that they understand what the content is in the classroom, but they also see that content as being so much bigger than the classroom itself, and being able to make those connections and articulate those connections. So yes, Linford, I would love to hear a little bit more about your thoughts around how you create and foster this relevance in your courses.
Okay, so yes, I am Linford Lamptey, and then I do work in technical and professional communication. Very recently, we've had a minor in English in technical and professional communication, and so we're working around technical communication, and our students love it. So. Um, a little bit about technical communication. Um, it's mainly simplifying information, I should say complex information to um, different multiple audience. Sometimes we say less technical audience. And also, it involves communicating across different contexts, making sure that information is very accessible. And so we see that for most of us, we all do technical communication, breaking down things in our various fields to people who constitute technical communication. And it involves a lot of designing, which includes use of words, visuals, and structure, organization, just to get information accessible to people. So that's what basically is technical communication. It goes in very many different directions. But like you see in the next slide, we have different forms of technical communication. So when you buy something from IKEA, like a machine, a technology, it comes in some manuals, and then the manuals tells you how to operate the machine or how to assemble it or dismantle it, sometimes how to store that one. All those materials we do are forms of technical communication. It comes also with those of us who work in the labs, like the biology lab, the chemistry lab, the kind of research we do and how we report those things in the lab and how to even write the process people follow to accomplish certain procedure. It's all form of technical communication. Technical communication broadly also conceived um, um, deals with workplace writing. So white papers, letters, resumes, cover letters, and job application materials also cover technical professional communication. And then we have digital tools and how we interact with technology, the way we use our phones, the way our computer forces us to do certain things, or how it shapes us, all within the midst of technical communication. So dealing with data and technology. And if you see the next slide, we'll see that so with this broad thing, students come to class and wondering what's the relevance to this. And for me, and in the classroom, I tend to emphasize the consequences of what we do with communication and how communication shapes us. And so if we are writing manuals or things for people to use. And so most times our readings are for third parties and second parties. So for people to use, there's always a chance of risk. There's a chance of harm. If an engineer, for example, writes um, how to operate a particular machine. You may want to take into account the ethical responsibility of making sure that people who use it understand it well, they're able to operate it. Sometimes being mindful of the cost of replacing the machine is very important too. So these are things we take into account. And then audience matters. So who uses a thing? Readers, communities, people, and not just audience, but their needs, their level of thinking, their experiences they've had, their cultural shakeup, all those things come to us. So these are the things when we begin to think of technical communication and writing, we want to emphasize. And that's a relevant thing that when students leave our class, they'll always be able to think about the consequences of the things they do and how they communicate with people and the ethical implications of the people. And so that's why it matters. And that's what I define as relevance in technical communication class. If you could move to the next slide. So whenever I start a class, I take opportunity in the very first day to kind of like do like informal survey of what happens, what students bring to class and their expectations in class. And so on the very first day or the very first week, I tend to ask students like, why are you taking this class? What brings you here? And students have different some hits on the writing, and others say, I just want the C credits or the W credits. I need a class to take, or the technical communication sounds interesting, or my advisor said I should take it, or I want to improve my writing. And so, with all these things, you could see that there is embedded in it the relevance of the course, which we talk about consequences, ethical implications, and audience, but not so direct. And so I feel like then it is my responsibility to take this as a teaching moment to emphasize why it is. And so if you go to the next slide, we'll see that um, I point them to language on the syllabus. So I mean, relevance happens all through in the plan, as Jody said, the planning, beginning, middle, ending, we emphasize relevance at each point in time. So I build a language in the syllabus that says this class is built on responding to different audience. So here I wanted to emphasize audience and consequences and for things. So they read about that in the syllabus. And then as they continue to read, like we see in the next slide, um, um, they they get to come to understanding how we form those things. And one of the things that I do then is to use it to explain the things. But as I will say, looking at this, we we go back, like we went back to the syllabus, and then we come back to the classroom. Because most times I ask students to read the syllabus before class. And so I take them back and forth. And in the strategies I use, I think I keep taking students back and forth, back and forth. And that's what I do with the assignments that I do. And so I use Canvas hyperlinks, and I make students sometimes draw from certain assignments and then transfer the skills, the ideas into the current assignment. So that across time, then students will always be reminded of the relevance of the course. And so how assignments are connected becomes one way. Could we make a and so I one thing that helps me to do this, one reading that helps me to do this is a reading by Lisa Bickmore on the genre in the world. And then it deals with understanding of what a genre is. Because as you could see, when students come to class, we have different types of technical communication. We have like reports writing, we have manuals, we have dealing with technical communication. So these are differences, and students understand that these are different genres and different types of writing. But what constitutes a genre? So I make them read this. So we can see that genre happens in not on their own. And so when you begin to write a letter, you don't write the letter for letter's sake. You write a letter because there's a situation that calls for a lecture. There's something that happens. You need an employment. You need to put your skills to work. So it happens not in a vacuum. And so this article summarizes this very well. And it also tells people that their learning is through community and culture. And when whatever they write and communicate has the ability to shape and change the realities of people and shape the world of people and how they see world, how they behave. And also within all these things, there are a lot of things, forces are interplay. And so their writing may have an effect of somebody who may have an effect of him. So this article does this well. And then with this understanding, we go to the next. So yes, just before we go to the next slide. So one of the things that this article does is that it emphasizes that people come to communication with their expectations, with their histories, with their experience. And so they have certain needs to meet before they come. So they don't come that people who just need ways to do things, but they need things to accomplish things. So that's where the ethical dimensions comes in. So I take opportunity based on the readings we do in class to emphasize that. Can we go to the next slide? Okay. Okay. So this is like 2 weeks or sometimes 3 weeks after they've read the genres in the article. Sometimes they might have forgotten what it is or applying. So I directly to emphasize the relevance of consequences of articles, I link the article and I said, drawing from Lisa Beckman's article, could you now produce a manual or how to write a procedure for a high school students applying to UW or here for the first time apply to and then it starts a conversation of then what are the consequences of certain words and how certain words become confusing. Who am I writing to my audience? What do they need? What will meet their words well? And then also what kind of systems are they navigating as people, as undergrads, as people with less experience? And so the connected assignment here demonstrates how over time, timely, certain selected assignments will go back and forth, helping students to connect what they've learned and seem to be forgetting to revive those ideas and things, you know. And then next slide. Mhm. Okay. And then one other thing that I do with my students is something that I borrowed or I adapted from activity theory, and which is similar to the connected theory. I mean, it gave me the idea of the connected theory. So, activity theory focuses on the social impact of activity, that we live in an ecosystem that is shaped by people's expectations and certain expected conventions and norms. And that whatever we do, it's mediated through tools and instruments. And through this, we are able to accomplish one thing. So when I tie this into technical communication, for example, writing a manual or writing instructions to guide someone on how to do something or writing a report, then it helps me to break down how students can follow. So this is something I adapted from activity theory. And so as you could see in the next slide, um, I break down and tell the students that for you to write something, and I'm doing this because I want students to get back to the place that they need to pay attention to the consequences of writing and the person they write to and how they have to be ethical about it. So, who is going to do the task? What are they trying to accomplish? And what tools would you need to, or what tools? And tools sometimes have to be language will make them accomplish it. And then who will be affected by it? Who else might be a secondary user to this? So sometimes the community comes in, and what do we want to, and what do we want to, how do we count as failure or success? So this activity theory adaptation helps me to think about consequences in a more close related way to the students.
Thank you, Linford. And I just, as I've been listening to you both share, the thing that I was coming back to is, and I think you were speaking to this a lot, Linford, is this feeling of how are you in conversation throughout the quarter. So both of you have different ways of being in conversation with students, but I think this it sort of speaks to the idea that you don't just again, and I think we think about this a lot in terms of like how we design our courses and how we think about that quarterly system and what happens at one point and how do you assess, how do you scaffold your learning, but in that way, this is not something that you just have as a one day moment. It's something that you're really thinking about. And how do you find different ways throughout the quarter to be in conversation with your students and to be asking them how to articulate these ideas and to be asking them how they are understanding things and looking back and looking forward at the same time. So whether it is a project that they're working on or an assignment where they're thinking about that piece. And Linford, I also really like that you shared like this is my responsibility. Like how is it our responsibility to sort of be in this conversation and to help guide students in that process? So you both have actually, I feel like in some ways started to share some of the things that you were doing in what you may use in sort of documenting or sharing relevance in your promotional materials, but I'd love for you both to share a little bit more about how you've conceptualized that and what that might look like for you or has looked like for you. So, yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
Linford?
yeah, I'll
Yeah.
continue that way.
Great.
So let me continue that way. And Jody made mention of our research and presenting with students, and I see some value there. And so whenever I think about, I'm not yet going for promotion, but if I am to go to promotion, I'm going to, but I do this in my annual merit. When I'm going to promotion, I'm going to think about two main things in demonstrating how I make relevance visible in my work. And one is my research interest, and then two, I draw from my teaching philosophy. And so my teaching philosophy are the guiding principles that shape the way I connect with students and emphasize and create a learning environment for my students. And then those things, I believe that my research shapes teaching, and teaching in terms make us think about and what the things we research about and what is important, while research also makes us gives us opportunity to implement the things that we and how we do things in the classroom. So next slide. So my research, my teaching philosophy is grounded in three things. I believe that when I get to the classroom, what I need to emphasize is that building relationship in community through storytelling. And so in all ways that I organize my class, I have one thing at the back of my mind that I have to build relationship through community building. And so most of the time students get to work in groups, they get to talk to each other, and the peer responding is done in such a way that they do it as a group project, like group work. And so here it is to help students to get a bigger picture. And that's what I frame as storytelling. Storytelling is being able to organize your ideas in ways that be able to make sense to the outside world, because we tell story because they are audience, and the storytelling gives them the frame to emphasize audience and listeners and users of technologies that we do. So here I say that when I get to the classroom, we have to think of community, we have to think of building, and then also I tend to believe that the more we do, the more we learn. And so class is full of, like, as I mentioned, activity theory. It's full of, we learn, we read, we come and we do some activities, some discussions. And so learning happens through doing. And this is my teaching philosophy. And when you go to the next slide, you see what research I'm interested in. They are kind of connected. So in my research, I'm interested in how technology shapes communication and help us to make new meaning, knowledge making, and how the modern, the the old shapes the contemporary, and so how indigenous communities can shape contemporary through the use of technology, or how technology in the reverse could help people assert their identity and survivance. And so, what are the affordances in between both worlds, so the old and the new? And how do we think of preserving certain ancient values while navigating the modern transformation trending? So these are the kind of things I think, and they come to this. So whenever I um, to demonstrate relevance, in order not to stress and to think about all those things, I just go straight into my teaching and my research, because those are things that come to me very easy. Those are things I can think through because I need to show how this works in my class, and I see that this is a thing I rarely go through. So let's go to the next slide. So um, I explain my teaching philosophy. I explain what it is. That my In my promotion materials, I explain that my teaching philosophy, my teaching principles are built around building community and storytelling, and then communication as intentional act to avoid negative consequences, and then designing for ethical engagement. And so then I connect it to how it happens um, in my class and explain why it matters. And then I use most of the time students reflection, because every major assignment students do, I made them write reflection on the process and how the classroom structure and activities help them to come to the full conclusion of the class. So if you see the last, my final slide, so here in SAM, this is how I demonstrate my whole thing. So I name the approach. I I name and tell them, describe what my teaching philosophy is and how it is grounded in social justice, so that students can build relationships, they can see connections between what they do and other people. They can take into cognizance what the other world feels like. So that when they begin to write for others, they will not write for only their perspective, but for multiple perspectives. And then I demonstrated this through the consequences. So we looked at, most times, we look at the bad designs and how it has affected users in the past. And then I pick there from there, pick um, what students are saying, and the limitations and then the opportunities for growth around that. And that is how I end up demonstrating. So to name the approach, demonstrate the pedagogical moves, and then reflect on students' reflections or course evaluations, or which one becomes very handy and available to me at a point to demonstrate how I'm making progress.
Thank you, Linford. That's super helpful in kind of giving us a broad overview and also some of the ways in which the pedagogical moves that you discussed
Yeah.
show up in how you might, what kinds of artifacts you might use to help articulate that. Jody, please.
I have the opportunity to sit on our campus council for promotion and tenure at the Bothell campus for several years. So um, I would say that definitely follow what Limford is saying. I think that the statement, the personal statement that you have is really so key to understanding your whole dossier. And so how you weave that story throughout all of these different areas of whether it's pedagogy or research or service, I think is really helps to create for a more concise and cohesive narrative. But I just put some other ideas down. So, for example, demonstrating different types of syllabi in your dossier also help to augment what you're talking about in your statement. Um, Also having an opportunity to self-reflect. So as Limford said, self-reflecting on the students' evaluations, but also like an inventory for myself to say, I remember one quarter I was experimenting with like a different type of, instead of doing like oral presentations, we did a poster session, and it added a layer to the students of anxiety. And I learned really quickly that that probably wasn't going to be the best way to end the quarter or to give them like more time. So I addressed that in my statement. But news stories that might be covered around your class or some of the projects that you're doing, letters from community partners, or maybe stories even community partners have about your class, some student awards or fellowships. Like in doing the work that we do with our students and our teaching, there might be some really amazing things that students build on because of that. And definitely any grants that so much of our work here at UW can be grounded within our pedagogy and teaching. So this just gives some ideas of all of the different ways in which you can demonstrate how you're translating relevance throughout your three areas.
Thank you, Jody. I really appreciate both, again, how you both spoke to the reflection of your own teaching and also the experiences of your students and how you can sort of highlight and showcase those experiences in your materials as a way of kind of helping to bridge the gap of like what you intended or what you hoped to achieve or what you hope to articulate and what the students really experienced and how they were absorbing and sort of resharing the relevance of the work with back to you and to their broader community as well. Thank you so much all for being here, and thank you to our panelists for sharing and for inspiring us today. We really appreciate you being here.